Well, this has been and will continue to be a big day here for us in Curryville. Babies being dedicated reminds us that we're anticipating the arrival of the celebration of Jesus coming as a baby. And in just a little while here, we're also going to baptize some people. And that brings to mind the work and the ministry of Jesus once he grew and was no longer a baby. And his work is finished for us. Ever since this summer, when we worked our way through the book of Ephesians, I have been telling you, and I will continue to tell you, that before the earth was formed, God had a plan for your life. This very day was part of that plan. And when we work our way the whole way through the Bible and we get to the book of Revelation, 13th chapter, we find that Jesus was also part of God's plan for us. And that plan for Jesus to be our Savior was also made before the founding of the world. Babies are wonderful blessings, yet they are challenging responsibilities. Laurie shared a little bit with you last week about our challenge. I'll share a little more. When we brought Ian home from the hospital, we put him, he's now 28, so he wouldn't fit anymore. But we put him in this little carrier chair and put him on a coffee table and sat down on the couch together and just looked at him and asked each other, what in the world are we going to do now? I liked it better at the hospital. There was all these people to help and all these people that would answer questions when we had them. Have you ever felt inadequate, or that the circumstances in your life are something that you're just not ready to handle? Or maybe something that happened in your past makes you feel now like you're not qualified to handle something, or you're not worthy to handle something? One of my goals today with this message is to knock that thought out of your mind. Through history, people have had a desire for something better. And that comes about in the stories we write. Whether we're talking about the ancient characters of mythology, or the modern movies that are based on comic book superheroes, we like the idea of a good guy who's going to come in and fix everything that's broken and everything that's wrong, and evil will be punished and good will prevail. And it might be a cliche, but we want to see a happy ending to every story. Feel-good stories, whether they're fables or mythology or Batman, Robin, Superman, and Spider-Man. Okay, we'll get DC and Marvel comics both covered in there. Which one? Mr. Incredible. Okay, so we'll mention Mr. Incredible also. What we're looking for here is somebody to fix everything, right? Make everything right? We want a hero. The coming of Jesus is no fiction. His perfection is not fiction. Now, to begin the story of Jesus and how he came to us, I'm not going to tell you to go there, but if you were to open the book of Matthew to the very first chapter, you would see an entire page, probably, of nothing more than names. So I'm going to spare you all those names. I'm going to cut right to Matthew 1:17. Right about halfway through the first chapter of Matthew. We will tackle the second half of Matthew 1 next Sunday. So this part concludes, so all the generations from Abraham, that was the man that God called out to form his people, the Israelites. So from all generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations. And from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. And from the deportation to Babylon to Christ, 14 generations. No other gospel book, whether it be Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, goes into the incredibly painstaking work of presenting a genealogy, a family tree, if you will, for Jesus. But Matthew did, and with good reason. Matthew was a Levite. He was a Jewish tax collector. And he knew that to his people, genealogy was very important. So he gave us a comprehensive family tree. Did you see how meticulous he was? From Abraham, the whole way down. No one was left unaccounted for in the bloodline of Jesus. And the big question in first century bloodline genealogy, the big question was, who's your daddy? And who was his 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 daddy? It was a very patriarchal society. Nobody ever asked or recorded, who's your mom? Who's your mom? Nobody cared. It all had to do with the male head of the household. But in that first chapter of Matthew, there is a very historical change that's very easy to miss. But it was probably the first Jewish genealogy that was ever written that included women. Not just one, there were several women mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. I'm just going to talk about a couple. One of them was Rahab, believe it or not. Anybody remember the character Rahab from the story of Jericho in the Old Testament? The spies from Israel came and checked out the city of Jericho to see what was going to go on there, because God had given the order that they were to take Jericho out on their way to go back and get into the promised land. And the spies had a little help in the city of Jericho from a woman named Rahab, who was she was a prostitute, yes. Not only was she not a Jew, she was a prostitute. And she's been haunting me all week, because on my laptop I typed the word prostitute once for this text. And the rest of the week I could be writing procrastination, protest, and the autos thing just wanted to make it prostitute every time I typed P-R-O. So she's still causing trouble. Actually, Rahab got it together, because when the Jews conquered Jericho, they spared her life. They spared the life of her family. Rahab cleaned up. She married a Jewish boy, became a Jew. And yes, she, the prostitute of Jericho, was part of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. There is also a reference, and that would be the picture up here in the upper left corner. That's Rahab laying the spies down on the scarlet cord, getting them safely out of Jericho so that they could be safe. So that's woman number one that shows up Now the first one I'm mentioning. There's also a reference in Matthew 1 to King David's wife, Bathsheba. And she did not start out as King David's first husband. As a matter of fact, Bathsheba was the woman that King David had an adulterous affair with. But yet later, when the dust settled from all that trouble, she had a child that we refer to as King Solomon. So there again, the bloodline from King David precedes the whole way to Jesus. It goes through Bathsheba in the upper right corner of our graphic there. So, we have Mary then. Just a humble Jewish girl from a regular family in a rather rural part of Israel. Not the big city or anything. So, when we look at this entire family tree that brought us the Messiah, there's some junk in the trunk. There is some baggage. There is some dysfunctional behavior. The family line of Jesus was not perfect. Not at all. But when he came through all that and touched down on this earth in human flesh, he was the one human being, while God at the same time, who lived a perfect, sinless life. God and man at the same time in one body. If you use the illustration of a door separating God from man, when Jesus touched down, he was the dynamite that blew that door clean off the hinges. He touched down and made contact to be among us. And that, Charlie Brown, is what Christmas is all about. At the time of God's choosing, his predestined will, Jesus stepped into our world that he created to be the hero, the Savior, the one who promises a happy ending at the end of the story. And the only one who can. Because he knows how it's all going to end. And for those of us who have given our lives to Jesus and are disciples and follow him, guaranteed, no matter how rough the ride was through this life, you have a happy ending waiting for you at the end. We've been chosen by God. God finishes his plans. He doesn't leave them incomplete. We live in a time of waiting, however, because the babe who grew to be crucified will come back as a ruling king. Between now and then, things could be a little rough here and there, but I would just encourage you, keep the faith. That will get you through everything in this life. Know that God has a plan for you, all of you, and it includes Jesus. So in this special season, let that light shine out of you. More people will probably be receptive to listen to you talk about your faith in the next couple of weeks than they will the entire next year. So I pray that you take the most of those opportunities.